We have an echo.
Yeah, point of order. If people mute their mics unless they're speaking, we won't hear this echo. So that's everybody.
Okay.
First on our agenda for the day is, did everybody log in your time in Count Me In Boulder? So let's remember to do that, if you haven't yet. Now we can discuss any changes to the agenda, today's agenda. I have a small one that the commission memo, which appeared as a separate attachment. That was entirely my fault. Has a couple more lines in it. So when we get to the library commission update, we'll refer to the commission memo that everybody got as a separate document. Any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we will proceed. Do we have public comment today? Did we have any requests for public comment? David, you're muted.
We did not want to.
Okay. Well, today we have no public comments, so our item on the consent agenda is approval of the May minutes, the May meetings minutes. And does anybody have any changes to make to that? Hearing none. I can't remember, do we vote on approving the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes from the May meeting, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand.
You can't see my hand.
All right, and Joel, I think you said yes.
Yes.
All right. So the May minutes are approved. And now we have some information updates from staff. The floor is yours, David and Jennifer.
Jennifer, you want to take it away?
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't ready to do that. I thought you were going to do it.
Oh, well, I thought you had the numbers on the, because Joel had asked for the numbers on all
Yep,
the
I
people.
can get them. You want to tap
Yes.
dance while I do that?
Yes, I will tap dance. So as I wrote you on Monday, we had a number of layoffs. We had known these were coming. And, you know, we were asked to submit reductions for every offering that we made and describe the impact that may have on the community, and specifically underserved communities, and to examine everything through a lens of equity, specifically with regard to race and so we had done that. That was, you know, pretty massive. And from the point where we began, we were never really given a number from the city of what they were looking for. So it, you know, we worked through scenarios where the reduction was as high as 40% of our budget.
Sorry, David, a number of dollars, a number of people, a number of what?
We never had a dollar amount that we had to come up with. We worked from the assumption of around 33 to 40%. And so I was unable to come up with a scenario where we could operate anything at a 40% reduction. The best we came up with, I think, was around 34, 35%, which meant basically reducing our staff by half. We worked through a number of different scenarios because we did have the intention of being able to open the libraries at some point. And so we put forward those reductions to the executive budget team. The executive budget team then reviewed them. We typically when we are looking at these kind of things, it's a meeting that we're in where we talk about things in terms of priority. We did have to rank various services in terms of priority. And so in the end, we offered up everything that we could, and described the impact. And I have so many staff to thank. I specifically Jennifer Aston Walker and Jamie Kopke, who quite eloquently wrote what the impact would be on the community. Yes. And we submitted those to the executive budget team. The end result was that they elected to take reductions both in staffing and in non-personnel expenses of around, I think the final number was around 13%, 13 or 14%.
13,
and so those, we were informed last Thursday of what those reductions would be. I met with the managers on Friday. We talked about a plan of action for how we would go about for informing staff and what accommodations we could make with regard to the non-personnel expenses. And then on Monday morning at 8 a.m., we called each of the staff members who was being laid off, who were having their furlough extended, or who were being asked to return from furlough on July 1st, June 29th, I guess, June 29th. And so the total number for us.
I'm ready.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because I don't know it off the top of my head.
Right.
So Jennifer, and I had the same question as Jane does. When you're talking 13%, 40%, is that relative to where we were in January or relative to where we were a month ago?
No.
To January.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So this is a 13% represents an annual reduction, so a total annual reduction. Let's see, right now we have 17 staff members on furlough, ready to return end of June. June 29th, I think, is their return date. We extended the furlough for 5 staff members, 4 from Meadows and 1 from Reynolds. That is extended through, is it September 30th, David?
Yes, September 20th.
20th. September 20th. We had 8 people to lay off, and they were from several areas of the system, so not one area. And then we also had to terminate employment of all the temporary staff that we have that work as substitutes, that serve at Carnegie Library, and we also have 1 member of that group that served in Building 61. And there are about 50 of those. I don't have that list in front of me. I can count it up later.
It's 50. It's 50. Yeah. So that's a number I do know. So the
Okay.
ones we terminated, it was regardless of funding source. So
yes.
Many people were impacted. Most of those people are not reliant upon the library for their full income. They are either retirees or piecing together a number of different substitute jobs with us and other libraries, or supplementing their income by working for another library like Jefferson County or Lafayette, and then substituting for us in Boulder. Several of them, it was their the majority of their income, and those were funded by the foundation. We had to terminate those employees as well as a part of the agreement with the union, because the union does not allow for us, the union contract does not allow for us to, they didn't want any appearance that we were supplementing union employees with paid employees by
Temporary.
another source.
Yeah.
So that was unfortunate because that was no real savings for the city. But nevertheless, we had to terminate those positions as well. So I've already approached the foundation to see if they're willing to take directly the contracts for those 3 employees who were directly funded by the foundation, to directly contract with those employees and bring them back on. The foundation has expressed an interest in doing so, and we'll probably make a decision about that at either a June or a July meeting.
So I have some more numbers for you if you're interested. Okay. So the total reduction for personnel and non-personnel totaled $1,005,700. $642,000 of that was personnel expenses. It represents an overall 13% annual reduction of our general fund portion of our budget. Let's see. In terms of FTE, we held some positions. We either held them or we're going to hold them once we have a couple of people retiring this year. All told, the number of vacant FTE we'll have is 10.5. The total FTE for the library currently is 76.75. So it's about a 13.7 reduction in FTE. That's full-time equivalent positions, not people. 8 of the positions were BMEA, so union staff. 8 of the FTE, I'm sorry, not positions, 8 FTE. And 2.5 FTE were management. So that's the personnel side. We, let me quick do a total here. Oh, sorry, it's already there. So in non-personnel funding, we lost a total of $363,135. That's made up of 100,000 of that is made up of the temporary budget for subs for those temporary employees. 182,000 of it is coming from the library's acquisitions budget, so library materials. Other larger, so there were several like smaller amounts that probably add up to around 40-ish, 50-ish thousand dollars were kind of general supply materials, things to run our offices, furniture, like for staff, office spaces. And then $30,000 was reduced from the Building 61 materials budget.
So question, a few numbers back.
Yeah.
FD vacant are 10.5.
Yes.
So the 76.75 was left after that, or?
That's the total we have. So the what's left is 66.25.
Thank you.
Yep. And
Any
we
other-
have a number of part-time positions that make up those FTEs. So it really amounts to more people than more positions than FTE. That makes sense.
Any other questions from commission?
I can say also that the FTE reductions are considered one time for 2020, and we're going to be submitting the same reductions for 2021. So the same positions will be held vacant for 2021 as well. So those are those will be under consideration for 2021. Likewise, the acquisitions reduction is considered one time for 2020, and we're going to submit the same amount for 2021. One time. So after 2021, we would have that replaced in our budget. And then the other non-personnel funding, the subs, the general like supply budgets and that sort of thing are ongoing reductions. So those come off of our budget completely, and if we need to get that money back at any time in the future, we have to request it as new money during a future budget process.
So how many people are employed by the library at this point?
Oh,
We're probably down to around 90, 80 or 90. It's somewhere in that vicinity. We were at 146, I think, including all of the, there's a lot of part-time employees, and we had a lot of temporary employees, so substitutes. All the temporary employees, regardless of funding source, are gone. We only had to lay off, and I hesitate to say only, but it's much better than we imagined going in, 8 standard employees. So standard employees are employees who are some full-time, some part-time, some with, extraordinary tenure at the library, where we were laid off. And so if you look at the FTE number is the number to look at, really. Like the FTE, as you know from the history we did around the master plan, we were at 91, 92 in 2000, and now we're at basically 2/3 of that at 66.
yeah.
65, whatever.
66.
66.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jane, I saw your question. Do the cuts seem fair across the departments? Again, I think I addressed this at our last meeting. It is disproportionate based upon department, right? So we are almost entirely funded by the general fund. We do have a small property tax, which amounts to, it's grown, as Boulder has grown, it's now represents, a sizable portion of our budget. But we made some, so typically the way we look at it is that the library fund, the money that comes in from property tax, we use to buy books and materials. Like we buy all the stuff from that budget. And that's just been a simple and clean way that finance and we thought that it would be good. We made some reductions there in order to preserve staff. So we cut $180,000, I think, from the materials budget, which was hard-earned money. I mean, we had to request that money over the course of time, even though it was our money. We requested that money to buy more materials to get to that $14, $16 per capita, which was our goal to spend on materials. rather than just people. We cut that budget by, 15, 18% in order to preserve some staff members. And that was a good decision. But then the general fund, the general fund reductions, we're right in the wheelhouse, right? So, or in the ballpark, as one likes to say. 13% is roughly what the city reduced the general fund by. There are other funds that were not reduced, right? So Parks and Rec had made more reductions than 13% because of their impact, because they have a special sales tax, which is a third of their budget, and they have a third of their budget which is based off of revenue, so which they're not earning right now. So they had to make cuts that were deeper than ours. Police and fire, who were deemed essential, did not have to make cuts as deep as ours. But does that answer your question, Jane? So it varies from department to department. Across the general fund departments, the amount is about 13%, and we're right in that ballpark. 13.7, 14%. The number of people who were laid off and terminated were a little bit higher, probably, than other departments, but that's solely based on the fact that we're a service department of the city, and so by being a service department, we're heavily driven by staffing, and so we had to make cuts to people rather than other things.
We proposed more, and we're also afforded the opportunity to recall a group of staff members to serve at the Public Health Call Center through the Office of Emergency Management, and we'll be able to keep them for the foreseeable future unless things change and the city asks departments to make further reductions this year. But we were fortunate enough to get 7 of those people off our list, if you will.
Yeah, so we redeployed 10 people to the county. That was a boon for us. That was, again, lobbying for the skills and abilities that library staff have.
Yep.
And the fact that we run a call center, the fact that library staff are used to being confidential, to looking up information, to providing people. So we looked at a lot of opportunities. Like we were offering staff for doing contact tracing,
To working with diverse populations more
to
than
do
any other departments.
Yeah, to just do whatever we could get them to do. And the city manager's office heard us, because I don't believe any other department was able to redeploy as many staff, as high a percentage of staff as we were. And so those staff, they're still on our payroll. I don't know what FTE that amounts to. It's probably something in the neighborhood of 6 FTE. We were able to preserve because they're being paid for through FEMA and or the county. Yeah, so those staff, they're not for the library right now, but if the emergency call center were to close, we would be in a position where we could reevaluate those staff members and perhaps be able to keep them if the economy is better, if there's a useful gainful employment that we could provide to the community, then we could bring those people back.
Are those 6 FTE part of the 66.25 or?
No.
Yes, they're part of the 66. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 66 is not what we have for the library right now. I think the number for the library, for the library operations beginning July 1st is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60, probably, right? Jennifer?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I can do a quick count up of the FTE on those 10 folks. So those 10 folks are serving in the call center. Some of them are part-time and they're fulfilling their full hours at the call center. Others are full-time, and so they're filling part of their hours at the call center, and then we're also using them at the main library to do the pickup service.
And there are a couple of, I think, one or two bilingual staff who are part of that redeployment. Spanish, English speaking.
Yeah.
And we were also able to, preserve a manager level position to go along to coordinate that group of 10. So that was also good.
Any other questions for David and Jennifer regarding staffing and budget cuts? Scott?
I have a bunch of questions. I don't know if this is quite the right space for them or not. Where do I want to start? At some point, we hope that the budget will start recovering, and they'll start generating more revenue. But the questions I have is, going forward, what does this mean in terms of rebuilding your staff with some of those positions and people? Because it takes time and money to train them and bring in the right people, and you've built your team, and so that's a difficult proposition. And as the second part of that, I know the city and the library is looking at building the new North Boulder Library. Is it going to be the classic case where they're going to have money to build the building, but no money to staff it? Or will it mean that the library will have to reduce hours at other branches or do something? So I guess that's a long question, but it's all kind of related.
Yeah, Scott, it's a great question. And so I'm going to speak entirely honestly here, openly and honestly. If we are able to reopen any of the branch libraries in the next year and a half, I would be extraordinarily surprised, right? So we were able to, by the call center redeployment, there are 10 people there, and around 6.5 FTE or 6 FTE. That is enough for us to run one branch location. So if the economy looks better in 2 or 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, whenever that emergency call center would close, we would request from the city that we would be able to reopen a branch or have a rotating staff that would at various days staff different locations and provide a level of service, right? So that's the goal around that. The branch that we've identified that has the best potential from a lot of different angles, right? So the best potential is the Meadows branch. It has the easiest access for drive-up, carry-out service. It has 2 large rooms where we could potentially reopen for computerized, people to come in and access computers and or to safely distance. And so, we could, if that call center closed tomorrow, we would be asking the city, can we redeploy those people for the Meadows Library to offer a similar service as what's going on at the Maine Library, right? So we would have daily carryout, and the reason why we chose Meadows was not simply because it had 2 big rooms and the better parking and easy drive up, but it's also located in an area which has a high level of density. It's the highest level of density within the city for low income and Spanish speaking populations, as well as the highest density for senior residential facilities. So those are the criterion that we used, anticipating from the governor's orders that people over 65 are going to be asked to continue to stay home through November from his most recent order. We would like to be able to serve low income Spanish speaking populations in Boulder and also the senior population. And so we're looking at all those options. And so Meadows seemed to be the best choice for us because of the concentration in East Boulder. And it's not perfect, but it would be the best one we have. And so that was the intent. With regard to Nobo, the Nobo library, I'm pleased that we're going to be able to move forward with construction. So construction, we had no intent of ever opening it before 2022. I mean, our deadline for completion of construction is 2022. At that point, I'm hopeful that the economy has turned around, and we're able to open a North Boulder branch. But we've also, since before this COVID crisis occurred, we were looking at what possibilities we had if the city was not willing to staff fully the building. And so we've looked at a number of ideas around partnerships with outside organizations, much like we've done at Maine, where we brought in the Small Business Development Center and the Farmers Market and various other partners who were able to activate the area. I've spoken to a number of partners about the potential to move into that place. We had requests specifically from the Latino community around building a kind of a non-profit co-working space. And so all those options are becoming more and more of a more forefront in our mind about how we could reopen that building, activate it so it's active 100% of the time, but only part of it is staffed by library funded staff. So part of them are funded by various nonprofits who are meeting with their clients there. Part of them are building an incubator space for food industry workers. We have a cafe there. We have a maker space. None of those, we don't have the funding currently to finish any of those spaces. So we're applying for grants to do so. But the context of the grants is such that we're looking at ways that we would bring in partners who would basically be able to take over those spaces, the maker space, the cafe, and various things, so that we would be able to activate them for the public. But it would be a thing where we were not solely looking to the city to fund staffing for those spaces. And we're looking ahead, right? So a couple of the people that we preserved in the 60 FTE or so that we have left, two of them are ideal for working in that kind of collaborative space in order to be like coordinating partnerships, managing partners who would work in a makerspace that had a relationship to whether kitchens or textiles or whatever we decided to do in that space, what we could afford to do. They would be the prime people to be able to coordinate that. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of long, but we're thinking through it all, and I don't think there's any guarantees that the city would be able to open it right away in 2022. We asked for a variance from the planning board, and it was not accepted. They want to know when you're applying for a permit to build a building that you're going to occupy it like more or less immediately, right? So we don't know that we're going to occupy it immediately. We had hoped that they would give us some kind of variance that we would finish the building and like it would only be partially occupied until maybe 2023. But that's not really in the cards. So at this point, it's an unknown. So we're going forward with the idea that we would occupy the space in early 2022, but we don't know that. You know, libraries are community spaces. It's really, and like it's always been my dream. Like, and we've been partially successful and partially not. Like the public dictates the program, right? They decide what the program is. They decide what happens in the library. They decide what the books are we have. And so, you know, it could be that North Boulder finally becomes that case where it happens. And that would be awesome.
Thank you, David. Any other questions regarding budget and staffing? Jane?
Yeah, so mine was just a point of clarification. I think I know the answer to this, but the first part of that answer, David, that's based on finances, not public health restrictions as far as what could open and what couldn't open?
All of our reductions are based on finances and not on public health. Okay. So that was a dispute we had with the, not a dispute, that was a conversation we had with the finance department and the executive budget team. All of our reductions are a result of the financial crisis and not a result of COVID. You know, COVID guided our decision-making process to some extent because of the fact that the Canyon Theater is closed for the foreseeable future. We don't know when we'll ever be able to encourage public gathering. So anything that we're doing that's ostensibly public gathering, you know, we had to look at those things for cuts.
Thank you. Good question. Anybody else? Joel, did Jennifer have all the facts and figures you were hoping for?
Yes, thank you very much, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
All right. So next on our agenda, we're going to hear about the contact-free carryout and the next phase of reopening.
Yeah, so the contact-free carryout is going well. You know, we spent the first 2 weeks kind of nailing down the processes. 2 days ago, we opened up, 3 days ago, we opened up new holds. I think we had 1,000 the first day, requests for holds. So there's a little bit of a backlog, but we'll catch up. And it's going very well. The public is being extraordinarily respectful. They're maintaining social distancing. I think our first customer, we have a photograph of her in the packet. It's a mother with a child. It's a great photograph, right? So that was the day that we opened up for the contact-free carryout. So June 15th, we'll start accepting returns. The courier will begin. We will start doing courier service, I believe, right around June 15th. So we'll be transferring materials from throughout the FLC. So people can request books from other FLC libraries, most other FLC libraries. And the hold system and the way in which we have the carryout service constructed will continue until we get to phase 3. So the questions that come up on returns, so at present we're under an order from Boulder County Health that we have to quarantine materials for 7 days. So when items come back on return, we move them to a room and secure them for 7 days. at which point then we can put them back into circulation and trap holds on those materials. So it kind of slows down the, as I've described in the past, the churn, right? So the churn is the way we do, is the way we move materials, and that's by getting them back on the shelves quickly. Popular materials may go out the same day that they're returned, and so our circulation numbers for physical items just goes up and up and up, because the quicker we can get books back to the shelf and in the right place, the more likely it is that somebody's going to find it and take it out and think, like, I want this book. So we're going to have a 7-day delay in that churn, and books will pile up, because I imagine there's a lot of pent-up demand to return things to the library and get some new materials. And so that's you, Juana. Yeah.
No, I had a question.
Yeah.
Are you hoping to get all the books back since March 11th or whenever that was at once?
No, we're phasing it. So we're asking people to do it in the first few days, or maybe the first week. It's A through M. And then if your last name begins A through M, you would return them that week. The second week, it would be N through Z. And then after that first couple of weeks, where we're regulating the amount of holds that we get back at once, then after that, we'll just accept regular holds at any time somebody wants to return them. Phase 3, we don't have a deadline for. We don't have a timeline for. I have heard that the governor is likely to lift all state sanctions by the early July or the end of July, sometime in July, at which point it will be entirely up to local control. At that point, it'll be totally dependent upon the city government and the Boulder County health officials. So we could feasibly begin phase 3 as early as August 1, but Boulder County health officials may have different recommendations and push that back into August or September. I don't really know. I don't have a time frame for that. That would be when we allowed people into the building for restricted use of the collection. We might have popular materials out for them to go through, and we might be able to provide some level of computer services on the second floor, but we would have to regulate the number of people who are accessing the building at a time. So probably at this point, it would be 50 people in the building on the first floor, 50 people in the building on the second floor. And if there were things to be offered, we could have potentially 50 people in the north building as well.
And the hours would be approximately 25% less than they currently, well, they were before the closure. So we wouldn't be able to operate our full operating hours.
I have a question about returns. And David and Jennifer, hopefully you can help me about this. If like me, I have, grocery bags full of books that I'm working through and I've had checked out. And there are a bunch of them I want to finish reading before I send them back. But what do you want everybody to return all of their books within those 2-week windows, or do you want us to wait? So this question might be, will there be fines, or will you be what? I don't think there are going to be fines, but it's like, I think it would help for people like me who are unclear on things to say, no, you don't need to return them all, though, but we'd like to see them by X date.
Yeah, it's a good question, Scott. We would obviously prefer that you keep your books at home.
Okay.
And so return will be optional. There's an auto renewal. If nobody's waiting for the book that you have, then we would prefer that you kept it as long as you possibly could. That would be great for us. And so we'll put that information out when we put out the information. If you have popular materials, and I don't my collection development people are not here. I'm not keeping track of what all the best sellers are and the most popular things. So there's probably, if you have popular things, then people are probably clamoring for them. And if you haven't finished them, then probably you should bring them back so that somebody else could have them. You know, part of the logistics for reopening holds and part of the logistics for, you know, for the phase, whatever, 1B, 2A, whatever you want to call it, before 3, is that we have to figure out how to begin to accept new materials, which we have not gotten you know, we've gone through with the facilities and assets, asset management, like to figure out how we reconfigure the acceptance of materials from distributors who we buy from. But people are going to want the new book, right? They're going to want the book that comes out tomorrow. And they want that book soon. And we do not currently have permission to begin accepting such books and or the people to process and get them into the system. So that will be a challenge for us. I think we're up to it. Most of those staff members were a part of the recall, so they will be returning to work. And so we'll figure out how to accept, you know, new materials, because libraries are so driven by a market that we don't control, where people really want the new stuff that's coming out. And we do not have a process in place right now that I'm convinced is entirely safe for the staff to accept new materials. Which, you know, we will figure it out. That room probably needs, the place where we do that probably needs some reconfiguration.
I also believe that when we start accepting returns, they're going to issue a due date of 30 days beyond that date. But don't quote me on that, because I don't know everything that goes on at that level. The reason they haven't been continuing to update due dates on things while we're closed is that it's too complicated in our system, being part of a consortium, to do that with so many different items and different due dates on things. So I think that for people who really want to get their stuff out of their houses and back to the library, we'll take it. But you'll have, you know, 30 days or a length of time to return your materials. And again, there are no fines on our library materials. And I don't believe that other libraries will be charging them either. Although you do have to pay late fees on some library items that you borrow from other libraries. But I think during this time, they probably won't be charged. You probably won't be charged. So.
So, Jane, your question about is what based on money or public health?
You already answered it. It was the previous question.
Okay.
About the getting back to operations.
I have a question regarding reopening. Will the moving around of stuff and thinning out and all of that require materials that wouldn't be in the budget otherwise?
Oh, you mean like
Or
furniture?
resources?
Yes.
What's that, Lana?
You know, well, when the library reopens, you'll have to thin out. I imagine thin out where people can sit and maybe widen the aisles. And is any of that going to require redoing lighting or any sort of facilities expenditure that we had not budgeted?
Well, no, we've gone over it with FAM. So facilities and asset management. I was in there with them a week or two ago, and we walked the entire building to describe what we would need to do. So the cost of actually repositioning shelves is not something we would do unless this is going on past September, October, November, right? So I would like for, I think the adults are well served by the holds system. You know, there's less browsing that goes on in the adult collection. I mean, there are some people who browse, but in the children's area, browsing is actually instrumental to how it drives service. And so we would probably, you know, we would probably have closed stacks you cannot go into the stacks. If you came into the library when we were open and said, I want, 10 mysteries, then we would have a staff member retrieve 10 mysteries or 20, and then you could select 10. The same would be for if I want 10 books on fire trucks and pets. And so we would retrieve a number of books. We would set them out for the patron. The patron could then select what they wanted and go. So it would be a closed stack scenario. We did look at the ways in which we could secure the building in that way, how we could ensure that computers were clean. And that's all that we already have a plan for. The two areas that were of most concern to me were really the acceptance of new materials, which is a smaller staff space, and the acceptance of returns via the automated sorter. So those are both situations where we have to have staff members in pretty close proximity to each other. And so we're looking at ways to improve the safety in those areas, probably spread staff out at a greater distance and install HIPAA filters so that the air is constantly being cleaned. If we have a runner in the stacks, and I don't know, I was a runner that way a long time ago. It's where I started in libraries, was a runner in a library where it was like, you get a request and you go and grab it and you come back and you deliver it to a patron in the shortest amount of time that you can. And that's kind of like the model for a closed stack library, is that people can come in, they can request whatever it is they want, and then you go and retrieve it. I'm sorry we got rid of dumbwaiters and pneumatic tubes. They would have come in handy these days. One of the first libraries I worked in had a dumbwaiter and pneumatic tubes where it came down in a tube. You'd pull out the slip, see the item you needed, you'd run and get it, and you'd come back and put it in the dumbwaiter and send it back towards the light.
So
great.
to answer the budget part of your question, Juana, there are some materials that we're having to provide, like personal protective equipment, extra hand sanitizer, maybe some materials to put like plexiglass guards up in front of public service desks, that sort of thing. We aren't budgeted for those purchases, but we are recording that they are a COVID expense. And the city has a list of eligible items for reimbursement from FEMA. So those items that we pay for that are related to the pandemic will be submitted for reimbursement from FEMA. So that money would come back to the city probably several months, if not more, from now. It wouldn't come back to the library per se. So for the next year, we are doing estimates for those sort of expenses, and the city is going to do a combined budget request from all departments for personal protective equipment and other materials related to being able to operate during the pandemic.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate, but the person that we had in Building 61 who was designing the plexiglass barriers was laid off on Monday. So he's no longer employed by us. I hope the foundation will pick up his contract and we can bring him back to start redesigning the plexiglass barriers for our work areas.
Any other questions for David and Jennifer regarding reopening and how the carryouts are going? All right, thank you very much for both of those reports. It's like we're visiting hearing about a whole new library that we're unfamiliar with. The next,
if I can just say, Juana, when you make that remark, I mean, the staff who remain are incredibly dedicated and are incredibly forward-thinking They are pushing forward to redesign this new library, and they're not just, you know, they're not just there, they're energetic about it. And so we also have staff, again, I'll call out Jamie Kopke and others who are, you know, designing training programs for reorienting people to work as they return from furlough, to train them on the new culture of working primarily virtually, what to expect. We have training sessions that are designed for people who are experts so far in Teams and Zoom, to reacclimate all of those employees who will be coming back to work in July 1. And so we've never lost sight of the extraordinary culture we've been able to build over the last number of years. And so we are expending time and energy on thinking about how we engage those employees and get them motivated to do work in teams and do great work. So,
and provide library services in a virtual environment. That's like they're learning as they go,
yep.
And they're doing wonderful things. It's really inspiring.
Yes, it is.
I wish I could. We didn't figure out how to load it when you requested yesterday, Juana, that we have a report on Summer of Discovery. All the staff involved, the leadership staff involved in it, are all already engaged this evening. But one of them recorded a video in a single take, a 10-minute video and it's super. Like, it would have been exactly what you wanted. We'll figure out a way to send it to you. We can't figure out how to load it into this environment, but you know, it's. I watched it and I thought, like, oh my gosh, like this person has totally figured out this whole how to virtually communicate. So in a 10-minute video, she gives a complete overview with all the things you wanted, like the energy, the positivity, all that stuff.
Excellent. I look forward to that. All right, so next on our agenda is the commission memo. And our first on the list is our ongoing outreach efforts. And you have all received and read a couple versions of the letter that we're composing as a commission to send to council. The latest one had a paragraph that included Jane's input regarding addressing the last 10 days that have just brought a lot of things to the forefront. So I had a few questions. Yes, Jane.
One, we probably need to chat about the paragraph, because I love how you included it, but there's a couple of things that I was referring to, programs that happened in the past, not programs that were going to happen and be cancelled. So I don't know that we need to do that with everybody on the line, but we'll take this conversation offline to just refine that paragraph a little more.
All right. And I had a few questions and read some of them directed to David specifically.
I thought all those were fine. You know, the estimate for the contribution of the city to the library is $13.4 million. And so I think, you know, there's been a lot of, if you remember the last few times we've been there, the dispute was about how much the city would save. And I think the number 10 to 12 is good. I think by saying 10 to 12, I think that's a good number.
Okay.
And better that we're general than too specific. I so appreciate the work of Johnny Teeter, but she tended towards specificity that changed like a week later. So 10 to 12 is good. What was the other question you had for me?
The other one was, I said the library has suffered disproportionately, fact check with David, in the last 2 rounds of staffing and budget cuts. These are only the latest setbacks in a long string of setbacks.
I'm fine with that language. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, You could drop disproportionately and it would still ring true. I think it's fine though that you say disproportionately if you would like, right? So we've never recovered from the cuts in 2000. We were building back up to that from those cuts, but we were still a long way off, right?
Yeah.
We were still, I mean, as far as what portion of the city's budget we occupied in 2000, we're nowhere near that anymore. We're nowhere near the FTE percentage of the city that we were in 2000. So I think it's fine if you say disproportionately. In the case of this, the furlough and then these layoffs, we're at 14%, right? So 14% is roughly what the city is reducing the general fund by. In that sense, it doesn't occur over every department, but we're not Parks and Rec, which is in much more dire straits than we are.
All right, and then I said farther down, library districts. Okay, so in the fallout from this pandemic, municipal libraries, including ours, have furloughed or laid off staff in the face of budget cuts. Library districts, however, have retained staff. And maybe a month ago when we talked, you had mentioned a couple libraries around Colorado where the district's libraries were open for curbside pickup. What is it like now?
No, they're in good stead.
So this is accurate to still say they have.
That is accurate, yeah.
Okay. Then the one about ROI, return on investment. I know the Champions fact sheet, we've had that kicking around, but I'm not sure where that came from. And that's another specific wonky piece of information. Trivia. This is a trivia quiz, Scott, so we're gonna quiz you. I'm kidding.
So actually, while we're in a brief moment, I actually have a question about that last paragraph you were asking David about some of the other library districts not having cuts.
No.
While that may be true now, depending on what happens because of the Gallagher Amendment, that may not hold forth for the coming year or thereafter, because if counties have to recalibrate the percentage between residential and commercial property because of what's happened, that's going to diminish a lot of their revenue, depending on how they're structured under Gallagher. And so as I say, it may be true for now, but I don't know if that's going to hold in the future, because I don't know specifically all those different districts, their funding mechanisms, and how they're tied to Gallagher and all that other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The window is for them. The window for us is tomorrow. The window for them is basically 2 years. But I think a lot of them are looking at, a lot of the ones who have not already debruced are looking at debrucing now. But there may be reductions that they have to make, but they have a couple of years to plan for it. So the actual reductions won't, because the assessment year would be 2021. So any reductions that they would see would occur in 2022.
So then the return on investment, do you know where that came from, David? That fact? Okay, so maybe Johnny remembers.
I think it came from every library.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. And then for me, my last question was the last paragraph. Over the next few months, we welcome to continue individual conversations with council and appropriate city staff. We will develop a game plan after conferring with you. I wonder if we even need to include that in this letter. And I'm just open to people commenting on that or anything else?
I thought it was important. Can you hear me?
Joel, it's very hard to hear you.
Okay. I thought it was important to have it in there to let them know moving forward. We're not going to be standing in quicksand.
It looks like he still has two windows open, either his phone and his computer or something, which is causing that feedback. This happened last time too.
I think he said it was important to keep it in there.
Okay.
I just closed my computer. I think it's important to let your council know that we're not going to be standing still. This is still a high priority on our agenda, and we're going to move forward, including meeting with them to discuss issues.
All right. Anyone want to add or?
I've gone back and forth on that phrase. My preference is I'd like to let that idea marinate for a few days and then say, when do you want to send this out?
I think soon. They haven't heard from us since March, and they used to hear from us daily. So, we could always do a follow-up letter or, maybe even make it more vague saying, I don't know. Maybe offline we can exchange ideas about how we can conclude this.
Yeah, I've got a few other thoughts that I'll share with you offline.
Okay. Then the other, another concern that I have with this letter, I'm imagining Bob Yates reading it and saying, well, all the departments are getting cuts, like he said in his, in his bulletin. It's like, yeah, you're going to see cuts. Sort of, so what? Not that should keep us from sending the letter, but I guess I don't want to sound whiny like we're the only ones suffering through this. But on the other hand, we're the ones who need to advocate for the library. That is what we're tasked with doing. That is our mission as a commission, to speak up for the library.
Well, Juana, I think that traditionally when we write things, we try not to write them for the lowest common denominator. So I would say to continue as this is and not worry about that.
Okay.
My sense of it is with a communication like that is this letter. I like the things about the return on investment, the lack of funding over the years. To me, those are all the really important pieces of that letter. And to me, the middle paragraph or so where we talked about how people use the library for job searches or et cetera, that to me, I think, was one of the really critical pieces. And it had kind of been buried in the middle of the letter. And this is, getting the library going, getting it back to, a reasonable level of service. It impacts every single person, every single household, every business, every nonprofit. It impacts everybody in the city. And for that reason alone, it's reason to put this in front of the city council. But I think we need to think a little bit about the packaging of it, of this particular letter, in terms of really focusing on, people use the library for computers to do job searches. People use the library to need to access business materials to research. new jobs or new industries or new businesses to open, et cetera, developing a business plan. Those are the things I think that we really should be highlighting, at least initially, and then moving forward, we can start saying, okay, these are things that are happening now. We can start adding additional pieces to saying, how is the library going to be important going forward?
Yeah. No, I think that's an important point, Scott. Our previous letter was exactly that, like the library is not a nice thing to have, but really an essential thing to have. And we can reintroduce some of that. And here, the other thought I have is we don't want to make this such a long letter that they sort of skim through the first paragraph and give up.
Mm-hmm.
My thought on it is the comment you made about don't want to sound whiny, which I completely appreciate. But I also think that some of our newer members of the council haven't walked every step of this with us. Some of the older members of the council have, and they've heard this information a lot of times. And, maybe for them it's a little bit of I told you so. I think it appeals to some of our newer members of the council who have maybe some more of that kind of social justice view on the way that they make decisions. And so I don't think that we should at all worry what our tone is, what we've said in the past, how we're coming across. I think you're absolutely right. It's our job to advocate for the library. I don't think this is whiny. And I think this is, if they don't read it, they don't read it. But we're making our point, and we've got some very valid points at this time.
Yeah, and so I think the first, how should we go about redrafting this? We can't meet. So should we circulate it for people to do drafts, or maybe do you want to call me, or we lost Joel?
No, I'm here.
Oh.
I think we just lost one of Joel. I think that was Jonathan.
Hey, Joel, or Joel, do you want to take on the final draft? I'm just putting
Absolutely.
the question out there.
If anybody that has comments, changes to this draft memo, send them to me. I'll try and incorporate them in another draft memo.
All right, because then we can also use this letter and send it to we can't do an open letter to someone else in the newspaper, but we can, tweak it just enough to make an opinion piece or a letter to the editor out of it.
So Juana, can I have a second?
Absolutely.
So I really loved Jane's paragraph. I think it added a great deal to the letter. But one Boulder, so you want to talk about race. We are planning on going forward with that in a virtual sense. So we don't know exactly what it looks like, but the programming team that we preserved, they're super jacked about turning that into a vital, community conversation, and the foundation wants it to go on too. So they're already, recommitting new funding to that program, and the staff are ready to dedicate themselves to making that a vital program, probably beginning late summer and then running into the fall. And we still probably have Ijeoma, who would do a virtual reading and discussion introducing the book, and then also at its conclusion sometime later this year. So
excellent.
That's great. David, can I connect with you then to rewrite that paragraph to make sure that because we can just change the tone of that, have how we are helping at this point, and then I'll send that on to Joel once I've connected and make sure that all of the points that we make the program is what we're going to do to move forward.
I don't think there's anything. I think it's a great paragraph, Jane. I would remove either state the one book thing, or remove it entirely, because that's going to be a big thing for us. I think once Summer of Discovery is coming to conclusion, we're going to be rolling that out, and spending a lot of time and energy, I think, on that book.
Yeah, I think then we can probably, because I haven't quite seen what the Summer of Discoveries, the theme of it this year, but from the initial look at it, I thought that may also have some things that would help maybe prove our point that we're one of the vital institutions in the city that can help in this kind of situation. So maybe if we just rephrase it of what we are doing to help out with things like this, and that will be kind of an argument in itself, not what we're not doing, but how we are doing this.
Yeah, the Summer of Discovery's theme is sharing each other's stories, and you know, the youth services staff and the programming staff would like they're thinking of ways in which we can spend the entire late summer and fall, you know, finding ways to help families and people talk about race around the one book thing. But you know, like all the story times, not all of the story, a lot of the story times, a lot of the programming that we'll do, you know, including, you know, having some poets and some other people like we had planned to do with in a more public setting. We'll do them virtually online and host as many people as we possibly can by promoting videos of you know, some of the same poets that we were looking at putting out there, to have that, to begin that to help with that conversation in our community.
So Joel, I've also found a few commas and things here and there, and I'll send you a fresh,
Okay.
almost final draft.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Wasn't the whole notion of this one book being on a racial equity topic proposed or asked for by council?
Yes. So the initial request came from a council member, 2 council members.
So is there a way to acknowledge them for recognizing the importance of having this conversation through the library, or something to that effect?
But they already knew that the library was the right forum.
Yeah.
In the letter, you mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm just putting it out there. Like,
Yeah.
this might be an opportunity to extend the olive branch, if you will, rather than.
Yeah,
but
it might be, but I honestly, I know that the 2 council members who brought it up are supporters of the library. It kind of happened through circuitous means, so it wasn't an official ask of City Council. It occurred through work that my wife does in the community, and through friends of hers, and through a request from 2 specific council members to have a book discussion, and then I think actually the council members recommended 3 or 4 books, and so that was how we actually landed on Ijeoma. But I don't know, that really wasn't, they didn't ask me directly.
Okay.
They asked vis-a-vis my wife because of the work she does in the community and some things that had happened on council. So I think it probably would evenly split them. And I honestly, I'm not in direct communication with those council members. So I don't know.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Then I had written down here discussion of email exchange with tech support, but David and I talked through that. I don't know that we need to bring that up in the meeting. You know, the American Library Association, for anybody who hasn't peeked in their website, they have continuing ongoing webinars about how to engage library supporters during COVID. And then we are at the updates from commissioners representing us in other venues, starting with the foundation.
I have an update, but it's going to take me 1 second to pull up the email. So sorry, bear with me.
All right.
Okay, I have it. So I connected with Patrice and Alicia to just check in on the Halo Fund, and also just to see how it was going, especially with the newer round of layoffs. And so I'll give you what they passed on to me. So specifically for the Halo Fund, to date they have raised $12,812 and paid out $4,813. Together with the matching grant and the Library Foundation's initial contribution, the total remaining in the fund is $30,811. Based on initial eligibility requirements, staffers were able to apply for an up to amount of $500 until June 28th. We're currently revisiting these requirements to account for laid off staff members. We have received 13 requests for assistance and have made 11 payments. 2 requests had only just come in. They're currently working with David on the staff bridging program that would see us potentially contracting with laid off staffers. Oh, that I didn't need to read out. Okay, that's where we're up with the foundation. We're not meeting this month. That's it, unless Joel, you have anything else with the foundation?
No, I think that's it. I think that's fine.
Any questions?
I have 2 questions, one for Jane and Joel, and then a follow-up for David and Jennifer. So I'll start with the with David and Jennifer. Earlier in the week, I forwarded to you an email that said fundraising in a virtual world, and I thought that might be useful to forward it on to the foundation via Jane and Joel. So if you think it's useful, I mean, at least I would forward it, and then that lets them decide if they want to use it or share it with the foundation, because it's 20 ideas to do virtual fundraising online, and since organizations can't do in-person fundraising, there may be an idea that they like, or there may spur some conversation about a second idea. So
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. That was great.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second question it's for the whole group, but it's really more to Joel and Jane. You know, given what staff's had to put up with for the last few months, and they're going to continue to go through for the next few months, do you think if you could talk to the foundation to see if they could spring some funds for one or another thing? One would be to some kind of staff function, party, I don't know, whatever I want to call it, sometime in the next few months, just to say as sort of morale booster, or if it would be a better idea to wait maybe until when things are more really operational and do some sort of reopening party to celebrate with the community and with, you know, the staff, to say, geez, you've been through a lot, welcome back, that sort of thing. So I'm just throwing that out.
It's a great idea, Scott. I would definitely pass on that. They do a staff appreciation every year, and there is separate fund put aside for that. It was a donation from a former staff member, and so they try and do something every year, and it usually coincides with the annual staff meeting, which is typically in mid to end of September. So I will definitely bring up that question with them to see what they're planning to do, or if they've even started to think about that. They also typically do a gift card for each staff member on their birthday. I can check in and see whether they're continuing that. And I know that the Halo Fund, which is for the staff that are on furlough, well, I guess I don't know, but I have received a little bit of feedback from staff who've even reached out to email me and thank me, which I thought was really nice because I don't actually have any day-to-day interaction. So I feel like from what I've heard from a few staff members, that feels like that's gone a long way to support the staff. But I really like this question, and I'll definitely bring it back to make sure that we're on top of that because it's a really great point.
And I just forwarded Scott's email to you both. So you should have.
Any other business from Foundation that we should know about, or other updates, upcoming items?
Nope.
All right. Thank you, Joel and Jane, for that. Champions, we're planning on doing another email writing and letter writing campaign to keep in the forefront the importance of our library, both to council and the public at large. And the third item is the emails and phone calls to commission. We had two more students, Crestview, so thoughtful and well written, and you can see those responses in the memo handout. Anything else from outside venues that you might be involved with? All right, so that brings us to the director's report.
So I don't have anything to add to it. If you have any questions about what's in the report, I'm myself or Jennifer are happy to answer them.
David, is there any update on public art for the North Boulder Library branch? I didn't have any information to include in the memo, but I thought maybe you could give an oral update if you attended the meeting.
I was unable to attend the meeting. It's going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, the public art. Stephen, were you there?
I mean, I wasn't at that specific meeting. What? I don't have any updates. I don't know. Is there something going on that I should know about? I'm just confused if there's additional updates.
No, they just had a meeting with the technical review committee, and that was when I was.
Oh, you were out of town.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's all good. They had some good questions, but no, it's proceeding apace. So. Are there any other questions about the report?
I
So
was
David,
looking
the community needs survey, how is that communicated to the community? How did that survey go out?
Joel, we sent that out via our newsletter and our web page, and we did get quite a lot of response on it. We're working on fashioning another to work on what people's expectations are around reopening, what they would want for us to be able to offer when we reopen. So that survey is not ready yet. I'll be happy to share that with you as we get closer to that date. But since we don't have a date for when reopening might occur, we're reluctant to put out a survey to get people. I don't want to get people's hopes up if July turns into September, turns into November. So.
Okay, thank you.
Juana, you're muted.
Hi. So, you know what we didn't discuss is whether we're meeting again in July.
Oh yeah, we did forget that.
Because traditionally we've had we've had July off, but this year we didn't have a meeting in March nor April. And we talked about a few things that we could cover in our July meeting. Some of these things included, Stephen, your report on social services at the library that we were hours away from hearing in March.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean that's a huge question now, and the social services being provided to people through the library right now, it's in Denver even, it's unbelievable, and the library staff there has actually done a lot of efforts to make those services available and not through other venues, even though they're not actually present at the library. So yeah, I'm happy to do that in July. I don't have a ton to report. I don't my meeting with the my contact in Denver was canceled due to COVID-19, but we have been in contact, and I have some other resources, and there are some funding resources if we want to consider this seriously for the future. There is money for it that we would need to apply for. So I'm happy to talk about that in the July meeting and prepare for that for everybody if you'd like that, Juana.
Yeah, because it would be good to know, you know, in normal times, which we someday will have again, how things were.
I don't know. I don't know if it's normal is gone. You got to get used to it.
Or we could call it new normal.
New normal. And with that,
the
So,
other items.
If I can weigh in there briefly. So we were able to preserve part of our funding for security. We are proposing for 2021 to bring in security in-house, as well as to bring on staff a peer navigator. So it would be, it's not entirely doing away with a security system, but it's more to acknowledge the discussions we've been having in Library Commission for the past 2 or 3 years. And then as far as funding, Stephen, you might want to forward that to, because one of the things that we were able to preserve when we were preserving staff is we've stood up a grant writing team. So there are several staff members we were able to keep from layoff because they had grant writing experience and potentially could bring in new revenues in the future. And so we have a small team doing grant writing currently, and we are applying. I should have mentioned this earlier. So we have applied for a number of grants. We're currently working on a CARES grant for that would be it's around North Boulder, the North Boulder Library, but a sizable grant. We have some other small grants that we've applied for. 2 of them have already come into fruition. So we've gotten, I think, $20,000 from a group to support activities for Building 61 and some other things. So that is an active part of us that we did not have before this crisis began, but staff who are dedicated, they're spending a lot of time reviewing and applying for grants.
So the peer navigator would be coming out of a grant that you're writing, or is that already?
Well, if we could get grants supplementing that fund, that would be awesome. No, we are going to be requesting in our budget requests for 2021 to bring I don't know, we probably won't call it security anymore, right? So we're bringing all of that stuff in-house rather than contracting out with a separate service provider. And what we're proposing is a full-time security officer and a 3/4 time peer navigator to replace what funding we currently have existent for paying for security. So our security budget was reduced.
No, it was not.
It was not reduced.
No.
So we
proposed to reduce it, but they didn't accept that proposal.
Okay, so yeah, we're in good stead with money to bring security on when we reopen the building, but we're looking at orienting it more towards service and helping the unhoused population, find resources in the community.
David, yeah, I will reach out to my friend who is the grants writer for DPL. And if you want, I can follow up and get you the contact information. I know there's a private person who is funding a lot of this, but they said they're a person who's this is a pet project for them, and they've been funding these peer navigator type programs or similar programs for people who are currently unhoused at libraries around the state. So I can make those connections.
That would be awesome.
David, I have one other comment about that. Is in a different life, I worked on a federal grant project through the Health Sciences Center, and it was a project dealing with people with disabilities going back to work. And as part of the grant, we piloted what was called a consumer navigator. And we had 2 pilot sites, one in Grand Junction, one in Colorado Springs. And my job was to create some resource guides and do different things to support some of those people. And they were housed within a workforce center, and they worked with the Division of Vocational Rehab, the Workforce Center, Social Security, that sort of thing. But what I mean is, what my point is that if your grant writers want to contact me about that concept, I'd be happy to share with them how that worked, so they can consider it and say, we like this, we dislike it, whatever.
That would be great. That would be awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much, Scott.
David, in the past, we have been limited in how grants can be used as far as library budget thing, city,
Yeah. So
red tape,
yeah, it's a balanced one.
shackles.
So a number of the grants we're applying for as the Library Foundation, right? So the 20,000 that we've received so far have been as the Library Foundation is the applicant for the grant, and we're a partner. For the CARES grant, we're writing that as the city, and the foundation will be a partner. And we're looking for another partner in that grant as well. I think for the if we were to do a grant for the peer navigator, we would probably do that as well as the city. So for city grants, for city sponsored grants, we have to get approval from the executive budget team to even apply for a grant. And so in the case of the CARES grant, the CARES Act grant that we're applying for, we need a 20% matching. So I'll be requesting that 20% matching from the foundation, because the city doesn't have the funding to match the 80% from the CARES grant. But that was brought to us by, the city has a, he's the liaison to the federal government and the state government, and he keeps track of grants as well. And so he notifies me of grant opportunities that are out there. And specifically, like in the case of the CARES grant, they reached out to the city to see if there were any projects in the pipeline that might qualify for this grant. And we were the ones, the North Boulder Library was the one that was deemed the most feasible because of the time frame. And so we'll apply for that grant through the city. But it requires, I'll have to get the foundation on board as well. But they've already committed the money to North Boulder Library. I think we can probably just portion the money out in a way that that the 20% contribution to the grant is not a new ask from the foundation. Rather, it's money that they've already committed, right? So they've committed to $500,000. If we can take a portion of that to make it a matching for the grant, we might be able to, quadruple that amount of money.
Yeah, I think that helps pretty good. It's technically obese for
What?
I don't know what that was. Somebody's computer talking.
All right, so that was a combo of talking about the director's report and our potential July meeting. Other things that we had also we didn't have our annual retreat, and the bulk of that was going to be strategizing for the November election and or strategizing for a library district. I always want to call it proclamation. That's not the word, but setting up the library district to either have a vote on it this November or next November. We didn't do any of that. Obviously, things have changed a lot. We were going to have the city attorney come and report to us. We had some questions, and I think we have answers to those questions. You said, Jennifer, that
We have answers that will probably need discussion.
okay. So there's a lot we can talk about in
Regarding
July.
policies that Scott wasn't part of, so we might want to talk about what that is. That's kind of vague. So we have a plan to review all library policies within 3 years, every 3 years. And the last two we were working on before the closure were the sponsorship policy and the rental of the Canyon Theater and Gallery policies. And there were changes we wanted to make. And upon review of the city attorney and the risk manager, they were concerned about liability issues. So we wanted them to come and speak to you all and answer your questions. There was a series of questions from the commission at the time and share their perspective. I think it's going to need like a review again, and then probably a new set of questions and a discussion with the risk manager and city attorney, because I don't know that the answers are going to align with the commission's desires for the policy.
All right.
Jennifer, thanks for that. Jennifer, thanks for that update. And I, as an aside, I briefly read that in part of the minutes, but I don't remember all the details. But having said that, given what's happening with the virus, there may be some additional considerations to those two policies that need to be looked at going forward.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would love to hear about in July is what do we call it? Our performance data of how the curbside, you know, what the volume of the curbside patronage is, and book returns and all of that.
Yeah, we'll try, Juana. We don't typically give the second quarter data until August, but I'll see what we can pull together. I think second quarter ends in June, right? So we'll have data compiled to the end of June, and then typically what we do is we need a little bit of time to coalesce all that data, and then Gina's report usually comes out the midpoint of the next quarter. So that I think typically isn't that right, Jennifer? We usually give the reports in.
Yes.
I think it's in August. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I'll see what we can pull together for you in July. Certainly, we can do an anecdotal report, but I don't know if we'll have all the data at that point.
All right, thank you. So do we need a vote to see if we meet in July or not? Or procedurally, how does that work?
Well, to just let you know, availability of David, Celia, and I, the week of July 13th, there are 3 evenings that are potentially available according to our schedules. That's Monday the 13th, Tuesday the 14th, and Thursday the 16th.
But not the week of the 8th?
No, I think somebody has got meetings scheduled for that. Yeah, so the 6th is possible, looks like. It looks like David has commitments on the 8th and the 9th, so Wednesday and Thursday.
Juan, are you thinking this will be a length of meeting like this kind of meeting, or longer like a retreat?
David, you're muted.
I can do the 8th. I signed up. I'm doing a virtual conference that week on equity.
Okay.
Jane, I'm thinking it would be a regular meeting like this one.
Okay.
So it would be our April meeting in July. Because I don't think we have enough of a strategy yet about a library district to do a retreat quite yet.
Plus it'd have to be virtual.
Okay, so the 8th, first Wednesday in July, as is traditional, we'll have a replacement meeting.
So, and Juana, just thinking aloud, we don't necessarily want to make this meeting too close to the August meeting as well. Because otherwise it's going to be, I think, too time compressed.
Right.
Yeah, so we keep it to the first Wednesday, the first Wednesday is the 4th of July or something.
No, it's the 1st.
The
And,
1st of July.
We have a furlough day that week, plus the holiday. So we'd have to issue the packet early to you, which means we'd have to issue it end of June.
Let's do the 8th.
Yeah, the 8th works,
Yeah.
and then we'll do the 5th will be our next meeting. So that'll be just about a month.
So do you want to catch up on the policy review and discuss it amongst yourselves, and then we invite the attorney and risk manager at the August meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So David, we pockmarked your report with all sorts of other stuff. If anybody else has questions for David on his report, or any other questions or items to bring up to the group? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to end the meeting. Anybody?
I so move. So we end the
Second?
meeting.
I see Stephen nodding, so he